I wanted to do a short video on some of my other detectors that do very well in both minerals and in iron. The Vista X being signal frequency about 16 kilohertz. It's an excellent machine. This is my standard mineral test bed. I've got the unit ground balanced. Close enough. A little better. Hard to do this one-handed. Okay, that's good. I've got it, the gain on 35 threshold maxed out. We'll back that down a little bit so it's not unstable. Got the first disc at the hash mark of 20. And the ground balance, you can see where the ground balance is, a little past 12 o'clock. To give you an idea, there's a typical nail in my sights, old rusty cut nail. They actually will false a lot more while they're still in the ground, but just to show you, it's disced out. Add a little bit to this. That'll be good enough for now. Alright, this is an easy target, a US 10-cent dime. Almost all my detectors will hit this just fine. Got a little trash over there. This is a brass cuff button at about 6 inches. It's probably actually a little smaller than this one right here, but similar. A 6-inch US copper 1 cent. An 8-inch US 5-cent nickel. A US clad 25-cent quarter at 8 inches. This is a brass clock gear. It's about 1.5 inches in diameter. It's 8 inches deep. It's a pretty large target, so this is actually a pretty easy target for most all of my detectors. And this is a 50 caliber lead minier bullet at 10 inches. This is a modern cast bullet, but almost exactly like what the Civil War bullets would be for people that have those in their area. This one's not oxidized, so So it hits all these targets just fine. It's very stable. You can monitor the ground balance. I'm in the two-tone with the iron volume all the way up. The interesting thing is you can manipulate the gain and the threshold. If you're working in minerals, you can lower the gain so you don't get blowback from the minerals and keep your threshold high and still do very well. That's at 20. I don't know why you'd ever want to drop it down to, 15, but you could. It's going to lose depth there. And those are relatively deep targets. So I set my gain according to my ground, and I normally run it as hot as I can. There's the preset at 45. The threshold I set according to EMI. My air conditioner unit just kicked on. So you got a little bit of a chirp at the threshold maxed out at 50. And you can hunt like that, but it makes the coil very, very sensitive. So I usually back it down a little bit. So by having separate gain and separate threshold controls, the Vista X is very adaptable to the conditions. It's also very EMI resilient, very stable, just something about its design. If you've got a lot of EMI, you can turn the threshold down. Leave your gain up if the ground allows it. So there's the threshold on 20 and the gain on preset 45, and it still performs amazingly well. And then the 50 caliber Minier at 10 inches. So the Vista X, by having the controls that it does, makes it a very, very versatile machine. The only thing that I've noticed is that the disc, which is normally very tight, once you find out and mark where different targets start to flip-flop between a high tone and a low tone, the disc is very, very precise. But once you get into the minerals, the disc starts losing its effectiveness pretty quickly. And on these targets, I can turn the disc up all the way, a little past 50, which should normally knock out a quarter. Here's a dime, iron tone, low tone. Here's a quarter. Not hitting it because I've got it down. Still giving a high tone. That's a 10-inch deep quarter, so the disc is starting to lose it there. Okay, there's a quarter. So the quarter's knocked out, but when you start getting deeper, whether it's in milder soil like over here or in the minerals, the disc is not effective any longer. But luckily, instead of calling this 6-inch deep cut button a low tone, it's still going to call it a high tone. Pretty much. The 6-inch deep US copper cent. Mostly a high tone, and that's with the disc maxed out. There's a nickel. Let's back the disc back up to just past what a normal nickel would be, which is about 33.5. So there it is on 35, which should knock the nickel out. There's the quarter. Let's crank the first disc all the way back up. That should knock out a surface quarter. But a deeper quarter is still going to high tone. So you'll still dig these targets in minerals. It will still call iron iron. I've got a nail over here. That nail's about 4 inches deep. So it does very well in the minerals. It also does extremely well in milder soil. It's one of my deepest units if the ground allows and the EMI allows me to run it that way. It's still ground balanced. So with the gain at the preset, the threshold at about 45, which is pretty high. Put my first disc back down to where I normally run it. Second disc I usually run on a nickel to make it flip-flop. That way I can tell if it's a nickel, or if it's below a nickel, or if it's above a nickel, and decide on digging. Here's a 10-inch US dime. It's kind of my standard depth target. The Vista X with the standard octagon coil. No problem at all. Very clean, very tight. 12-inch US clad dime. This is a hard target. I have just a few detectors that can just touch it every now and then. So that one won't get it. A US clad 50-cent piece, $half, 15 inches deep. Again, I've got some machines that will touch this one every now and then, usually with the big coils, using the stock octagon on the Vista X. Crank it all the way up. If you can hunt this way, you can get a whisper. That's not something you would ever stop to dig. That maybe, you might dig that. The 12-inch dime. It'll touch it now. But it's going to be hard to find a spot where you could hunt with those aggressive of settings. So go back to the preset on the gain. Go back to 45 on the sensitivity. This is a US clad 25 cent a quarter at 12 inches. Just a little bit. Little whisper. You might dig that if you were in a quiet place. Here's a quarter at 10 inches. Very tight. As far as iron separation, the Vista X does extremely well, even with the stock 11-inch octagon coil. Working in iron, you don't need a lot of gain, so 25, and you really don't even need a lot of threshold if you're working shallow, nail-infested sites, nail beds. So 25 gain, 30 threshold. The iron is still first tone breaks on 20, first disc point. This is kind of my standard current working separation slash unmasking setup. That's a US copper cent and a cut nail with a pretty good size head on it, 1 inch away, and then a little bit smaller cut nail with a head on it. It's about 1.5 inches away, but this nail is elevated 2 inches above the coin in the other nail. So it's a pretty tough target. It will simulate some things that you might find out on the site. So no false high tone, 20. You could bring that on down and really work a side hard, but you'll have to deal some falsing. So today we'll just leave it there, knowing that it's not picking up the nails. So standard 11-inch octagon coil, Vista X. Kind of one way. You raise up above it and it'll catch it both ways. Get down on the nail, the elevated nail, you just get a one-way hit. But it's clean. Perpendicular is no problem. But even on the one-way hit, it's a clean high tone. It's not the ragged sounding false high tone of iron. And you can hone in on it. You can't do that with falsing iron. Well, get back over here. That's that same big nail. Falsing iron it just sounds a little different. It's hard to tell on a speaker, but in the headphones, quality headphones, I run Killer Bees with the Garrett Z-Link system, Killer Bees that have high ohm speakers, and you really get some sound clarity and definition. So overall, the Vista X is an excellent machine. I've got all the coils that Deep Tech makes for it, and they're all excellent also. Each has a place. The big Demon coil is very deep, and those targets that we struggled with a little bit earlier at 12 and 15 inches deep, the Demon will hit them pretty good. And it's not too heavy. The smaller coils are excellent in tight work. So the Vista X is an excellent machine. This last target is I haven't even tried it yet. That's a number 4 lead shotgun pellet that I flattened with some pliers. It's not very big. Let's see if that stock Demon coil will hit it. I've dug some awfully small targets with this unit, smaller than I really wanted to. let's turn the threshold up all the way. Gain still down. Threshold all the way up. It does. Give it some more gain. Gain at 40. Threshold maxed out at 50. That's nice and clean and tight. That's probably about 3 inches above it. So for small micro targets, even micro jewelry or gold nuggets, this is a very capable unit. We'll see about using the demon coil next and see what it'll do. Okay, this is the Vista X demon coil. It is 14 inches tall, 12 inches wide, so it's a little bit wider than the standard octagon. So it's a little deeper, but it's noticeably deeper. It's an excellent coil. I normally have to shorten the shaft about an inch or so to use this coil comfortably for a long period of time. It's heavy, but it's not unmanageable at all. Very stable. I've reground balanced. Gained at 40. Threshold at 45. First disc point for the iron tone is at 20. So it's very stable. Even EMI, there's my air conditioners running. Very stable. There's that same nail. So that one's going to false a little bit, but that's a big nail too. Even as large as this coil is, you don't really have a problem with blowback from the minerals, even with, you know, relatively high gain and threshold levels. I mean, it ground bounces well. So the 6-inch cuff button, so you would dig that. 6-inch copper cent. Eight-inch US nickel. US 25-cent clad quarter, 8 inches. The big black brass clock gear at 8 inches. The ground changes a little bit on this end of the bed. It's slightly out of ground balance now. The 50 caliber lead minier at 10 inches. So even on minerals, it does extremely well. Where the big coil comes in handy is for really deep targets and covering a lot of ground, of course. So it's still ground balanced very well. In my milder bed, the 10-inch dime, the audio's nicely modulated, and if you have a good set of headphones, like I said earlier, there's a lot of nuance to the tones. And once you learn them, you can really ID what's there even without a screen. 12-inch quarter. Let's max out the gain, max out the threshold. See, it's kind of touchy now. But it will touch that 12-inch quarter now. The 15-inch US clad 50-cent piece, $half. And the 12-inch US clad quarter. So let's back it down to usable, very usable settings. 45 and 45. 12-inch quarter. Just a whisper. But with good headphones, you would hear that. And on a quiet site, I would dig that. 10-inch quarter. That's how much difference 2 inches of soil makes. It's a large difference in the tone and how hard the detectors can hit. 2 inches of dirt is a long way. Alright, here's our same setup on the separation unmasking with the 2-inch raised nail. I'm going to gain down to 25, threshold down to 30. That's the size nails that I have on my sights most of the time. But also in the ground, they're connected electrically to the ground, so they actually will false quite a bit more than these nails that are dry and disconnected from the ground. Big coil, 1 inch from the right hand nail, 1.5 inches from that elevated nail. Solid one-way hit, but you can repeat it. There it is. Once the machine locks onto a target, it will hang on to it until you release it from the coil's effect. That's why it's important to isolate a target and turn on it and see at what point the tone starts breaking down. So there's the Vista X with the big demon coil. Surprisingly, the smaller coils, the 8-inch XS, the 8-inch concentric does very well, the Super 6, and even the 5.7 DD, they're amazingly deep. The 8-inch XS coil will hit pretty much all of these targets, no problem. It will start struggling over here on this 10-inch dime, but it'll still get it. So I hope that answered some questions that people had about the Vista X. It's an excellent machine and a real bargain. It's kind of a hybrid analog detector, but they are a bargain. The coils are a bargain. They're readily available in the United States. Very well built, lightweight, balanced. I can highly recommend it to somebody that enjoys, you know, detecting and fooling with detectors and doesn't mind learning something new or something old, however you want to look at it. Thanks for watching.